moment Keanu stepped off that stage, everything changed. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud or just absorb what they'd witnessed. The host remained at his desk, frozen, as the reality of what just happened began to sink in. His producers were screaming in his earpiece, but he couldn't seem to move or respond. Keanu walked through the backstage corridors with purpose. Production assistants pressed themselves against the walls to let him pass, their eyes wide. No one tried to stop him. No one knew what to say. This was Hollywood history unfolding in real time, and everyone knew it. He found Alex in the green room, standing by the monitor with her arms crossed. The moment she saw him, her composed expression cracked slightly. He crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around her. No words, just that embrace. After a moment, he pulled back and looked at her face. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that," he said quietly. She shook her head, touching his cheek gently. "You have nothing to apologize for. That was incredible. Thank you for standing up for me. For us." One of the production assistants cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Reeves, the producer would like to speak with you before you go. And there's a lot happening online. It's already everywhere." Keanu nodded but kept his arm around Alex. "We're leaving. If the producer wants to talk, she can reach out to my team tomorrow." As they walked toward the exit, you could see phones lighting up in every corner of the building. Staff members were checking Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. The clips were already spreading like wildfire. In the age of social media, news travels at the speed of outrage, and people were outraged. Outside, their car was waiting. As they drove away from the studio, Keanu finally pulled out his own phone. The notifications were overwhelming. Texts from friends, fellow actors, directors, people he hadn't heard from in years, all expressing support, shock, admiration. His publicist called. "Keanu, I don't even know where to start. Every major outlet is covering this. It's the #1 trending topic globally. I've had 6 different networks call asking for exclusive interviews. What do you want me to say?" "Say nothing for now," Keanu replied. "Let what happened speak for itself." By the time they got home, the full scope of the fallout was becoming clear. Social media was absolutely dominated by the incident. The video clips had been viewed millions of times already, but what was most striking was the tone of the response. It was overwhelmingly, almost universally supportive of Keanu and Alex. People were sharing their own stories of being judged for their relationships. Women were talking about the impossible standards they face. Younger viewers were praising Keanu for defending his girlfriend so directly and powerfully. Older viewers were appreciating his points about ageism and dignity. Meanwhile, the backlash against the host was immediate and severe. Within 2 hours of the interview, 3 major sponsors had announced they were pulling their advertising from the show. Their statements were carefully worded but clear. They didn't want to be associated with that kind of content. Other celebrities began speaking out. Some shared their own experiences with intrusive media questions about their relationships. Others simply posted messages of support for Keanu and Alex. A few took it further, announcing they were canceling their scheduled appearances on the show. The network's phone lines were jammed with calls. Some from angry viewers demanding action, others from nervous advertisers. The executives went into emergency meetings that stretched late into the night. By the next morning, the situation had escalated further. Entertainment news shows that usually thrived on celebrity gossip found themselves in an awkward position. They wanted to cover the story because it was everywhere, but they couldn't criticize what the host did without acknowledging their own similar practices. Think pieces started appearing online. The Keanu Reeves interview and what it says about celebrity culture. Why we need to talk about how we treat women in public life. The death of gotcha journalism. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them were thoughtful and supportive. The host tried to do damage control. He posted an apology on social media that morning, claiming he'd gotten caught up in the moment and that his questions didn't come out the way I intended. It was the classic non-apology apology, taking responsibility without actually admitting wrongdoing. The internet wasn't buying it. Comments on his post were brutal. People pointed out that he'd clearly planned the ambush, that the folder of materials didn't just appear by accident. Others noted that this wasn't his first time crossing lines for ratings. By day 3, the network made their decision. They announced the show would be going on a brief hiatus for retooling and reflection. The host released another statement. This one more contrite, saying he was taking time to reflect on my approach and learn from this experience. Behind the scenes, the reality was harsher. Advertisers were demanding guarantees this wouldn't happen again. The network was fielding calls from publicists saying their clients wouldn't appear on the show. The ratings bump from the controversy wasn't worth the long-term damage to relationships and reputation. Meanwhile, something interesting was happening with Alex's career. Her art gallery website crashed from traffic. People wanted to know more about this woman who Keanu had so passionately defended. When they looked into her work, they found exactly what he'd said: a talented, accomplished artist with a long track record of respected work. Art critics wrote pieces about her career, careful to note that she'd been successful long before her relationship became public. Gallery owners reported increased interest in her exhibitions. It was ironic. The host had accused her of using Keanu's fame, but it was the host's attack that actually brought her work to a wider audience. A week after the incident, Alex broke her silence with a brief statement posted to her professional website. It was measured, thoughtful, and gracious in a way that made the host's behavior look even worse by comparison. "I've spent my career letting my work speak for itself," she wrote. "I believe art should be judged on its merits, not on who the artist knows or dates. The recent attention has been unexpected and, frankly, uncomfortable, but I'm grateful for the support and for the conversations it started about how we treat people, particularly women, in the public eye. And I'm especially grateful for my partner, who stood up not just for me, but for basic human dignity and respect." That statement got shared widely too, with many people noting its dignity and restraint. The contrast with the tabloid culture that had attacked her couldn't have been clearer. As for Keanu, he stayed relatively quiet in the immediate aftermath. He didn't do victory laps or press tours about what happened. That wasn't his style. He showed up for his movie premiere a week later with Alex by his side. They walked the red carpet together, smiled for photos, and answered questions about the film. When reporters inevitably asked about the interview incident, Keanu was brief. "I said what I needed to say in the moment. Now I'd rather focus on the work and the people who made this film possible." But the impact of that night continued to ripple outward. Other talk show hosts started reconsidering their interview tactics. Producers had conversations about the line between entertaining television and exploitative content. Some shows implemented new guidelines about questioning guests about their personal relationships. The broader cultural conversation that Keanu sparked didn't disappear. People continued discussing ageism, sexism, and the treatment of women in public life. Teachers used clips of the interview in media literacy classes, analyzing both what went wrong and how Keanu responded. 3 months later, the host's show returned from its hiatus, but it was different. The format had been softened, the edge dulled. The host was noticeably more careful, more respectful, but the damage was done. The ratings never recovered to their previous levels. The trust was broken. Meanwhile, Keanu went back to being Keanu. He made movies, rode motorcycles, was kind to fans, and maintained his relationship with Alex away from the spotlight as much as possible. But when they did appear in public together, there was a noticeable difference in how media covered them. More respect, less speculation, fewer cruel headlines. One journalist who'd been at the taping that night wrote a reflection piece 6 months later. "I've covered entertainment for 20 years, she wrote. "I've seen countless interviews, hundreds of celebrity interactions, but I've never seen someone use their platform quite like Keanu Reeves did that night. He didn't just defend his girlfriend. He challenged all of us to be better, to think more carefully about how we treat people, to remember that behind every headline is a human being with feelings and dignity." The article concluded, "In an industry built on artifice and image, Keanu Reeves showed us something rare and valuable: authentic integrity. He risked his reputation, walked away from a major platform, and stood up for someone he loved without calculation or concern for how it would play. In doing so, he didn't just win that moment. He changed the conversation." A year later, Keanu and Alex attended a charity art auction together. They were relaxed, happy, clearly comfortable in their relationship. A reporter approached them carefully, respectfully, and asked how they were doing. "We're good," Keanu said simply, smiling at Alex. "Really good." "And the incident from last year?" the reporter asked. "Does it still affect you?" Alex answered this time. It was unpleasant in the moment, certainly, but it also showed us who our real friends are, and it started important conversations about how we treat each other in public life. If something good came from something negative, then maybe it was worth it. Keanu squeezed her hand. Plus, he added with a slight grin, it proved I can still surprise people. After all these years in the business, that's something. They laughed together and the reporter got her photo. But this time it was on their terms. Respectful, dignified, human. Back at the network, the talk show host was in his office, reviewing ratings reports that continued to disappoint. His phone rang. Another celebrity publicist calling to say their client wouldn't be available for an appearance. He hung up and stared at the photo on his desk from his early days in television, when everything seemed possible and success felt inevitable. He thought about that night often. How it had seemed like a good idea, a way to create buzz and boost numbers. How it had all fallen apart so quickly. How one decision had essentially ended his career as he knew it. But mostly he thought about Keanu's words. About dignity, respect, and the weight of the platform he'd been given. About choices and consequences. About treating people as fully human rather than content to be consumed. It was a lesson that came too late to save his show, but maybe not too late to change how he moved forward. At least that's what he told himself on the difficult days. As for Keanu and Alex, they continued building their life together, away from cameras and controversy. They supported each other's work, shared quiet moments, and proved that sometimes love is exactly what it appears to be. Two people choosing each other, every day regardless of what anyone else thinks, and occasionally, when someone in media started to cross a line, to make a joke at someone's expense or ask a question designed to humiliate, someone would remember that night. Remember Keanu standing up, speaking truth, refusing to play along with cruelty masquerading as entertainment. Remember what happened to that talk show host? They'd say, and usually that was enough to make people reconsider, because dignity and respect aren't just nice ideas. They're choices we make every day about what kind of world we want to live in. That was Keanu's real victory that night. Not humiliating a host or winning an argument, but reminding millions of people that we can choose better, that we should choose better. And that sometimes standing up for someone you love means standing up for everyone who's ever been diminished, dismissed, or degraded for someone else's entertainment. That's the lesson that lasted long after the trending topics faded and the headlines moved on. And that's the story that people would tell for years to come, whenever someone asked them about the night Keanu Reeves changed live television forever. The host finally found his footing, or thought he did. He put on what he probably believed was a reasonable expression, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. Okay. I hear you. Look, I was just asking questions. Playing devil's advocate. That's what interviewers do, right? We ask the questions that might be uncomfortable but that people are thinking. Keanu's expression didn't change. Devil's advocate, he repeated slowly. That's what you're calling it? Yeah, I mean, I don't personally believe all that stuff. I was just bringing up what's out there in the public conversation. You can't blame me for what people are saying online. The host was trying to distance himself from his own words now, acting like he'd been some kind of neutral moderator instead of the person making the accusations. Actually, I can, Keanu said firmly, because you chose to give those voices a platform. You chose to present gossip and cruelty as if they were legitimate questions. You don't get to hide behind just asking questions when you're the one who decided which questions to ask. The host shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. I think you're being a little unfair here. This is live television. Things get said. It's not that serious. Not that serious, Keanu said, and there was something almost sad in his voice now. That's the problem, isn't it? To you, this is just content. Just another segment. But to the person you were talking about, it's her life, her reputation, her dignity, and you treated all of that like it was disposable in service of your ratings. The host's face was flushed now. With all due respect, Keanu, you're a public figure. She's dating a public figure. That comes with certain realities. People are going to talk. The media is going to have opinions. You can't expect everyone to just stay silent about your personal life when you're one of the most famous people on the planet. I'm not asking for silence, Keanu replied. I'm asking for basic human decency. There's a difference between public interest and public humiliation. What you did tonight was the latter, and you know it. Keanu turned to face the audience and the cameras more directly. His posture was open, his expression earnest. I want to talk to everyone watching for a minute. Not as an actor, not as a celebrity, but as a person. Because this is bigger than me or my relationship. This is about how we treat each other. The cameras stayed locked on him. In living rooms across the country, people put down their phones and actually paid attention. We live in this culture now where tearing people down is entertainment, Keanu said. Where someone's lowest moment gets turned into a meme. Where attacking strangers online is just something people do when they're bored, and we've become so used to it that we don't even notice how cruel it is anymore. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Women especially get this treatment. They're constantly judged, constantly criticized. Too young, too old, too ambitious, not ambitious enough. Too pretty, not pretty enough. Dating someone successful? She must be using him. Single? She must be difficult. There's no winning because the game is rigged. Someone in the audience shouted, "Tell it." And others murmured in agreement. And the age thing. Keanu continued, warming to the subject. Why are we so weird about women aging? Men get to be distinguished and silver foxes. We get movie roles as action heroes and romantic leads well into our 50s and 60s. But women, they're supposed to be young forever, or they're considered past their prime. He shook his head. Alex has gray hair. Beautiful gray hair, by the way. And she's chosen not to dye it. Not to pretend she's younger than she is. She's confident in who she is. And somehow that's controversial? That's worth questioning? The fact that a woman in her 50s exists publicly without apologizing for her age. That's threatening to people. The audience applauded again. The host was shrinking in his chair, clearly wishing he could disappear. Here's what I think, Keanu said. I think a lot of people have forgotten how to see other people as fully human. We see celebrities or public figures or people online and we forget there's a real person there, someone with feelings, with dignity, with a life that extends far beyond what we see in photos or headlines. He glanced back at the host, and I think some people in media have forgotten that their words have weight. That when you have a platform like this, you have responsibility. You can use it to elevate, to inform, to create something meaningful, or you can use it to tear people down for cheap ratings. Those are choices, and choices have consequences. The host tried again. Look, if I overstepped, I apologize. But let's be real, this is getting a lot of attention right now. This is going to be everywhere tomorrow. In a way, we're all winning here. The audacity of that statement hung in the air. Keanu stared at him in disbelief. Winning, Keanu said flatly. You think this is winning? You just publicly humiliated yourself on your own show. You revealed to millions of people that you're willing to attack someone who can't defend themselves. All for what? Views? Clicks? The hollow satisfaction of creating drama? The host's phone lit up again. More calls, more messages, probably all bad news. I'm not winning, Keanu continued. I'm standing here defending my girlfriend from baseless attacks instead of talking about the film that hundreds of people worked so hard on. Alex isn't winning. She's backstage dealing with the emotional fallout of being publicly called a gold digger on national television. The only person who thought they were going to win here was you. And I can guarantee that's not how this is going to play out. At that moment, the show's producer walked onto the stage. This was unprecedented. Producers don't just walk onto the set during a live show unless something has gone seriously wrong. She looked pale and anxious. We need to go to commercial, she said quietly, though the microphones picked it up anyway. Actually, Keanu said, I don't think so. If your host had time to make his accusations on live television, surely we have time to finish this conversation on live television. That's only fair, right? The producer looked between Keanu and the host, clearly in an impossible situation. The host gave her a tiny nod and she retreated off camera, probably to deal with the chaos in the control room. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Keanu asked, his voice quieter now but no less intense. It didn't have to be this way. We could have had a nice interview, talked about movies, told some funny stories, given your audience an entertaining hour. Instead, you chose this. You chose to try to make yourself look tough by going after someone who wasn't even here. He looked directly into the main camera. For everyone watching, here's what I want you to take from tonight. When you see headlines about celebrity relationships, about people's personal lives, remember that those are real people. They have feelings. They have families. They have dignity that deserves to be respected. His voice grew stronger. Don't believe everything you read online. Don't participate in tearing people down. Don't let cynicism convince you that genuine connection can't exist. And maybe, just maybe, let's start celebrating people for building each other up instead of for tearing each other down. The studio was absolutely silent except for his voice. As for the question of whether my relationship is real or whether Alex is using me, Keanu said, I'm not going to dignify that with a detailed defense. The people who matter, the people who actually know us, they know the truth. Everyone else? Their opinions aren't relevant to our lives or our happiness. He turned back to the host one final time. But I will say this. The fact that you couldn't imagine a successful, accomplished woman choosing to be with me for who I am rather than what I have, that says a lot more about you than it does about her or our relationship. The host opened his mouth to respond, but Keanu held up a hand. I'm done here, he said simply. I came to talk about a movie, and instead I had to defend someone I care about from baseless attacks. That's not how I want to spend my evening, and it's not what your audience deserves. With that, Keanu walked toward the edge of the stage. The host called after him. Keanu, wait, come on, let's finish the interview properly. But Keanu didn't stop. He walked off that stage with his head held high, leaving behind a stunned audience, a panicking production crew, and a host who was just beginning to realize how badly he'd miscalculated. Keanu stood slowly, deliberately, and the entire studio seemed to hold its breath. The casual, friendly guest who'd walked out 20 minutes ago was gone. In his place stood someone who'd reached a line they wouldn't cross, and that line was the people they loved. Actually, no, Keanu said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent studio. We're not going to take a break. We're going to finish this conversation right now, while the cameras are rolling. The host looked uncertain for the first time. His producers were probably screaming in his earpiece, but he was stuck. You don't cut away when Keanu Reeves is standing up in the middle of your show. That's the story now. Sit down, Keanu. Let's talk about this like adults, the host tried, attempting to regain some control. We are talking about it like adults, Keanu replied. Or at least I am. I'm not sure what you're doing. He turned slightly, addressing the audience directly now, and his presence filled the entire space. This is important, and I want everyone watching to understand what just happened here. The cameras stayed locked on him. The director knew gold when he saw it, even if it wasn't the kind they'd planned for. You just spent 15 minutes attacking someone I care about, Keanu said, his words measured and clear. Not because she did anything wrong, not because there's any evidence of wrongdoing, but because you needed content. You needed a moment. You needed something that would make people talk about your show. The host tried to interrupt. That's not fair. I'm not finished. Keanu's tone wasn't loud or angry, but it carried absolute authority. You pulled out tabloid photos and anonymous sources and social media gossip, and you dressed it up like journalism. Like you were doing some kind of public service by asking tough questions. But there was nothing tough about what you did. It was just cruel. You could hear people in the audience murmuring in agreement. The host's face was getting red, whether from embarrassment or anger was hard to tell. Let me tell you about Alexandra Grant, Keanu continued, and now his voice softened slightly, filled with genuine affection. She's an artist who's been exhibiting her work in galleries for over 20 years. She's published books, collaborated with writers and other artists, built a successful career entirely on her own merit and talent. She didn't need me for any of that. She did it through hard work, creativity, and dedication. He paused, letting that sink in. When I met her, she was already successful, already respected in her field, already making the kind of art that matters, that makes people think and feel. The idea that she would throw all of that away to be arm candy for a movie star, that's not just insulting to her. It's insulting to every woman who's built something with her own hands and her own mind. The audience erupted in applause, strong, sustained applause that the host couldn't talk over even if he wanted to. When the clapping died down, Keanu continued. And then there's the age thing. You made a point of mentioning that she's in her 50s, that she has gray hair, that she's not what people expected. What does that mean exactly? What were people expecting? A 25-year-old model? Would that have been more acceptable to you? The host opened his mouth, but Keanu didn't give him space to answer. The idea that a woman in her 50s being in a relationship with a man in his 60s is somehow scandalous or suspicious says everything about how we view women and absolutely nothing about her or our relationship. Why is it strange? Why is it noteworthy? Would you be asking these questions if she were younger and conventionally attractive by Hollywood standards? The silence from the host was answer enough. Of course you wouldn't, Keanu said. Because this isn't really about protecting me from gold diggers or whatever noble purpose you convinced yourself you had. This is about tearing down a woman who doesn't fit the narrow, ridiculous mold that society tries to force women into. Young enough but not too young. Attractive but not threatening. Successful but not more successful than her partner. It's exhausting and it's wrong. People in the audience were nodding. Some were wiping their eyes. This had become something more than an interview gone wrong. It had become a moment of truth. Keanu turned back to the host, who was slumped slightly in his chair. You know what the saddest part of this is? You probably thought you were being edgy, provocative. You thought this would be good television. But all you did was reveal your own biases and insecurities. All you did was show that you value spectacle over humanity. I was just asking questions that... The host tried again. No, Keanu cut him off firmly. You were making accusations disguised as questions. There's a difference and you know it. Are you being used? Isn't a question. It's an accusation with a question mark at the end. Is this real or just publicity? Isn't journalism. It's cynicism masquerading as insight. He glanced at the cameras again, at the millions of people watching at home. Here's what's real. Love is real. Respect is real. Two people finding each other and building something genuine together. That's real. It doesn't matter what age they are. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter if they fit the fairy tale image that movies and magazines have sold us. His voice grew stronger. What matters is how they treat each other. How they support each other's dreams and work. How they show up for each other when things are hard. That's what a real relationship looks like. Not a photo op. Not a publicity stunt. Just two people choosing each other every single day. The audience was completely with him now. Several people were openly crying. Even some of the crew members had stopped what they were doing to listen. Alexandra Grant is one of the kindest, most genuine people I've ever had the privilege of knowing, Keanu said, and the emotion in his voice was unmistakable. She's brilliant and creative and funny. She challenges me to think differently. She sees the world in ways I never would have considered. She makes me want to be better, not because she demands it, but because her example inspires it. He paused, collecting himself. And she's private. She didn't ask for this. She didn't ask to be analyzed and criticized and picked apart on television. She's here tonight because she supports my work, because she's kind enough to sit in a green room while I do press for a movie. And this is how she's repaid? By being attacked by someone who's never even met her? The host finally found his voice. Keanu, I think you're overreacting. This is just the nature of being in the public eye. People talk, people speculate, and that makes it okay? Keanu's voice rose slightly for the first time. Because that's just how it is, that means we should accept it? That means we should participate in it? No, I don't accept that. Just because something is common doesn't make it right. He looked directly at the host and his gaze was unwavering. You had a choice tonight. You could have asked me about my work, about my projects, about anything substantive. Instead, you chose to use your platform to demean someone who couldn't defend themselves. You chose cruelty over kindness, drama over decency. The host's phone sitting on the desk was lighting up with notifications. His producers, his publicist, probably his lawyer, everyone trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding. And the worst part, Keanu continued, is that you probably don't even understand why this is so harmful. You probably think I'm being too sensitive, that this is all just entertainment. But it's not entertainment to the woman sitting backstage right now, listening to a stranger question her integrity and her motivations. It's not entertainment to every woman who's ever been told she's too old, too gray, too unconventional to be loved. He took a breath, centering himself. Do you know what Alex said when we first started being more public about our relationship? She was worried about this. Not for herself, really, but for me. She was worried that people would criticize my choices, question my judgment. She was worried about making my life more complicated. His voice softened with affection and frustration. That's who she is. Someone who worries about others before herself, and I told her not to worry, that we'd handle whatever came, together. But I never imagined it would be this blatant, this mean-spirited. The studio audience had been silent during this whole exchange, but now someone started clapping. Then another person joined in, then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding. Not the polite, prompted applause of a talk show, but genuine, enthusiastic support. The host tried to speak over it, but his voice was drowned out. He looked to his producers, to the control room for guidance, but what could they do? This was happening live in front of millions of people. There was no taking it back. When the applause finally died down, Keanu spoke again, his voice calm but firm. I came here tonight to talk about a movie, to do my job and promote the work that dozens of people spent months creating. But I can't sit here and pretend that what just happened is acceptable. I can't smile and make jokes after you've spent 15 minutes attacking someone I love. The word love hung in the air. He'd said it plainly, without drama or fanfare, and somehow that made it more powerful. The air in the studio felt different now. That easy, comfortable atmosphere from just minutes ago had evaporated completely. Keanu sat up slightly straighter in his chair, his body language shifting from relaxed to alert. He'd been in this business long enough to know when someone was about to take a cheap shot. The host opened the manila folder slowly, deliberately, like he was revealing evidence in a courtroom drama. He pulled out several printed photographs and laid them on the desk between them. The cameras zoomed in, and viewers at home could see they were paparazzi shots of Keanu and Alex at various events and casual outings. Your girlfriend, Alexandra Grant, the host said, pronouncing her name slowly, carefully. She's an artist, right? Not exactly a household name. There was something in his tone, a condescension that made it clear this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. Keanu's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She's a very accomplished artist and publisher, yes, he replied, keeping his voice even. The host picked up one of the photos. She's also, in her 50s? Same age as you, more or less. He said it like it was somehow relevant, somehow important. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This didn't feel like entertainment anymore. She's a talented, intelligent woman, Keanu said simply. Age isn't something I really think about when it comes to the people I care about. But the host wasn't done. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, going for what he probably thought was a tough journalistic approach. Look, I'm just going to say what everyone's thinking. What a lot of people have been whispering about online and in the tabloids. Is she using you? The question hung in the air like a grenade. In the green room, Alex's hand went to her mouth. The production staff around her looked horrified. One of them started to move toward the door like maybe they could stop this, but it was too late. This was live television. Millions of people were watching. Keanu blinked slowly. Excuse me? The host doubled down. Is she using you for fame? For career advancement? I mean, let's be honest here, Keanu. You're one of the biggest movie stars in the world. She's an artist who most people had never heard of until she started dating you. That's just facts. The way he said facts was particularly grating. Like he'd done some kind of investigative journalism, instead of just repeating gossip and making assumptions based on nothing but cynicism. Keanu's expression had gone completely neutral now, which anyone who knew him well would recognize as a danger sign. When Keanu goes completely still and quiet, that's when you should be worried. But the host, riding high on his own sense of drama, didn't pick up on it. I've got screenshots here, the host continued, pulling out more papers. Social media posts questioning the relationship. People asking whether this is real or just a publicity stunt. Some people saying she's a gold digger who saw an opportunity with one of Hollywood's richest actors. The word gold digger hit like a slap. You could actually hear a few audience members gasp. This had crossed way beyond uncomfortable into something ugly and mean-spirited. Keanu held up his hand, trying to interject. I think you should, but the host rolled right over him, his voice getting louder. And let's be real about something else. Hollywood relationships are notorious for being fake, for being manufactured by publicists and agents. You've been private about your personal life for years, and suddenly you're walking red carpets with her. It makes people wonder. It makes people ask questions. Questions that are frankly none of anyone's business, Keanu said firmly, his voice cutting through the host's monologue. The host held up the photos again. These are from various events over the past couple of years. Art galleries, movie premieres, charity events. Events where there are cameras, where people are watching. Some might say it's convenient. Some might say she's building her brand on your name. In the control room, the director was having a quiet panic attack. The phones were already starting to ring. Social media was exploding. But the train had left the station, and all they could do was watch it happen. The host pulled up one more piece of paper. I've got quotes here from sources close to the couple. He made air quotes with his fingers, saying that she's been pushing for more public appearances, that she wants to leverage your fame to boost her art sales, that her gallery shows started selling out only after people knew she was dating Keanu Reeves. Alex had stood up in the green room. Her face was pale, but her expression was one of controlled fury. One of the production assistants tried to offer her water, but she waved it away, her eyes fixed on the monitor. "Do you have any actual evidence for any of this?" Keanu asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Or are you just repeating tabloid gossip and anonymous sources?" The host smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "I'm asking the questions that people want answered. That's my job. And look, Keanu, I like you. Everyone likes you. That's why people are concerned. They don't want to see you being taken advantage of." "Concerned," Keanu repeated, and there was something sharp in that single word. "Yeah, concerned. You're a nice guy, famously kind and generous, and unfortunately, in this town, nice guys can be targets. People see someone with your wealth, your fame, your influence, and they see opportunity." The host was really warming to his theme now, probably thinking he was doing some kind of public service. "So your theory," Keanu said slowly, "is that a successful artist and businesswoman, who was doing just fine before she met me, suddenly decided to throw away her integrity and reputation to, what? Get her picture in a few magazines?" The host shrugged. "Stranger things have happened in Hollywood. We've all seen relationships that were clearly more about career than connection. And let's talk about the age thing again for a minute." "Let's not," Keanu said flatly. But the host ignored him. "She's not exactly what people expected when they heard Keanu Reeves was dating someone. I think we can all be honest about that. She's older, she's gray-haired. She's not a model or an actress. Some people have suggested this is some kind of statement you're making, some kind of rebellion against Hollywood standards." The audience was dead silent now. Even the band looked uncomfortable. This had stopped being television and had become something else entirely. A public humiliation attempt that was backfiring in real time. "So she's not young enough or pretty enough for me, is that what you're saying?" Keanu asked, and his voice could have cut glass. The host tried to backtrack slightly. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what people are saying. There's a conversation happening online in the media, and I'm just bringing it into the open. By attacking someone who isn't even here to defend herself," Keanu pointed out, "I'm not attacking anyone. I'm asking questions." "There's a difference." The host was getting defensive now, sensing that maybe this wasn't going as well as he'd hoped. "Is there?" Keanu leaned forward slightly. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent the last several minutes suggesting that my girlfriend is a manipulative gold digger who's using me for fame and money. You've questioned her appearance, her age, and her motivations. And you've done all of this based on what? Anonymous sources and internet comments?" The host shuffled his papers. "I'm simply trying to get to the truth." "The truth," Keanu said, "is that you're using my relationship as content. You're taking something private and personal and turning it into a spectacle, and you're doing it in the most insulting, demeaning way possible." Social media was absolutely on fire by this point. Clips of the interview were being shared thousands of times per minute. The hashtags were trending globally, and the overwhelming response was outrage at the host and support for Keanu. The host tried one more angle. "Look, if there's nothing to hide, if this relationship is genuine, then why not address these questions head on? Why not clear the air?" "Because," Keanu said, his patience clearly wearing thin, "I don't owe you or anyone else an explanation about who I love or why I love them. Because Alex's worth and value as a person aren't up for debate on your show. Because some things should remain private, not because there's something to hide, but because they're sacred." The word sacred seemed to catch the host off guard. He paused, his prepared question suddenly seeming inadequate. "She's one of the most genuine, talented, brilliant people I've ever known," Keanu continued, his voice stronger now. "She was successful before me, she'll be successful after me. She doesn't need my fame or my money. What we have is based on respect, admiration, and genuine affection. Something you clearly know nothing about." The audience started clapping tentatively at first, then building. The host tried to regain control, holding up his hand for quiet. "I think we've struck a nerve here," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "Maybe we should take another break and come back to finish the interview on a more positive note." But Keanu was already standing up. It was one of those perfect Los Angeles evenings where the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The kind of evening that makes you forget about traffic and chaos for just a moment. Keanu Reeves stepped out of a black SUV outside one of the city's most famous talk show studios. And immediately, a small crowd of fans started cheering. He smiled that genuine smile of his, the one that reaches his eyes, and took a moment to sign a few autographs. A teenage girl told him he was her hero, And he responded with his trademark humility, saying something like, "That's very kind of you, but I'm just a regular guy." That's Keanu for you. Decades of fame, and he still acts like he can't quite believe people recognize him. Walking beside him was Alexandra Grant, his girlfriend. She was elegant in a simple black dress, her silver hair styled naturally. Alex, as friends call her, is an artist and publisher who's been making waves in the art world for years. She and Keanu had been dating for a while, though they'd kept things pretty quiet. In a world where celebrities post every meal and moment online, these two were refreshingly private. As they walked toward the studio entrance, Keanu kept his hand gently on the small of Alex's back. It was a protective gesture, but also one of genuine affection. You could tell just by watching them that this wasn't some Hollywood showmance. They had that comfortable ease that real couples have, where they don't need to constantly perform their relationship for cameras. Inside the building, something felt off. The production assistants seemed nervous, whispering to each other and avoiding eye contact. One of them, a young guy with a clipboard, looked like he wanted to say something to Keanu but kept stopping himself. The energy was weird, tense in a way that didn't match the usual pre-show buzz. Keanu noticed it too. He'd been doing this long enough to sense when something wasn't quite right, but he's not the type to make a fuss or demand explanations. He just mentally noted it and continued being his professional, courteous self. The talk show host they were visiting had been struggling lately. His ratings had been sliding for months, and the network executives were getting impatient. He'd built his career on being edgy and provocative, walking that fine line between entertaining and offensive, but lately that line had been getting blurrier. The competition was fierce, and he was feeling the pressure to create what his producers called viral moments. In a meeting earlier that week, his team had pushed him to be bolder, more confrontational. "We need water cooler moments," one producer had said. "We need people talking about the show the next day." The host had nodded along, feeling the weight of his contract negotiations looming. He needed big numbers, and he needed them fast. Backstage, Keanu was shown to the green room, a comfortable space with leather couches and a table full of snacks and drinks. Alex settled in with a book she'd brought, while Keanu chatted with the makeup artist about her recent vacation to Hawaii. He asked genuine questions, remembered details she'd mentioned in a previous visit. That's the thing about Keanu that people who work with him always mention. He treats everyone with the same respect and interest, whether you're a studio executive or a makeup artist. A producer came by to run through the talking points. The interview was supposed to focus on Keanu's latest movie, some funny behind-the-scenes stories, maybe a few questions about his motorcycle company. Standard stuff. Nothing seemed unusual about the rundown. Keanu nodded along, asked a few questions about timing, and that was that. What he didn't know was that the host had a different script. One that hadn't been shared with anyone except his closest producers. One that was designed to shock, to provoke, to get people talking. The host had convinced himself this was good television, that pushing boundaries was his job. As showtime approached, Keanu gave Alex a quick kiss and headed toward the stage. She wished him luck, though he'd done this 1,000 times before. There was a monitor in the green room where she could watch the interview, and a few of the production staff members hung back there, presumably to make sure she had everything she needed. The studio audience was already warmed up and energetic. The bright lights, the cameras, the band playing the show's theme music. It was all familiar territory for Keanu. He heard his name announced, and the crowd erupted. People genuinely love this guy. He's done incredible work for decades, but more than that, he's earned respect for being kind and humble in an industry that doesn't always reward those qualities. He walked out, waving to the audience with that slightly bashful smile, like he's still a bit surprised by the attention. The host stood up to greet him, all smiles and handshakes. To anyone watching, it looked like it was going to be a great interview. Two professionals at the top of their game, ready to entertain millions of viewers. The first segment went smoothly. They talked about Keanu's upcoming film, shared a funny story about a stunt that went wrong in the most harmless way. The audience laughed in all the right places. Keanu was relaxed, personable, giving thoughtful answers without taking himself too seriously. But then something shifted. It was subtle at first. The host's questions became more personal. He asked about Keanu's personal life, his relationship status. Keanu answered diplomatically, saying he was happy and grateful, keeping things general. He'd always been private about his relationships, and the audience respected that. The host pressed a bit more. "You've been seen out and about with someone special," he said, his tone changing slightly. There was an edge to it now, something calculating. Keanu smiled politely and confirmed he was in a relationship but didn't elaborate. He knew how this game worked. Give an inch and the tabloids take a mile. In the green room, Alex looked up from her book, sensing the shift in tone. The production staff members exchanged glances. One of them pulled out their phone as if ready to send a message to someone. The host leaned back in his chair, a manila folder suddenly appearing on his desk. Where had that come from? It hadn't been there a moment ago. Someone had clearly slipped it to him during the commercial break. Keanu noticed it but didn't react. He'd learned long ago not to show surprise or concern on camera. "We're going to come back after this break," the host said to the audience, his voice taking on that dramatic tone that promised something big was coming. "And we're going to talk about something that I think needs to be discussed. Something that everyone's been wondering about." The commercial break music started, and Keanu felt that familiar tingle of warning at the back of his neck. Something was definitely off. The host wouldn't make eye contact with him during the break, instead shuffling through papers in that folder. The studio audience buzzed with anticipation, energized by the promise of drama. Backstage, Alex set down her book, her full attention now on the monitor. She'd been in the public eye long enough to recognize the setup for what it was. Someone was about to try to make a moment at someone else's expense. The countdown started. 5, 4, 3, 2, and they were back live. The host's expression had changed completely. The friendly, jovial demeanor was gone, replaced by something harder, more aggressive. He looked at Keanu, then at the camera, then back at Keanu. "So, Keanu," he began, and there was no mistaking the shift in energy now. "Let's talk about your girlfriend." The studio lights suddenly felt hotter. The audience fell silent, and Keanu Reeves, one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood, realized he was about to be ambushed on live television. His expression remained calm, but inside every instinct was telling him to be ready. Whatever was coming next wasn't going to be pleasant.